Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph. A little bit of an abbreviated share today, I think. But we are continuing to learn Hilchos for Shoshana, and we begin on the second line down with Siv Zayin. Says the Mechaber, Im Nikav, if the shofar had a hole, it was punctured. And now we're going to stop for a brief moment and let's take a look at Mishnah Berurah Chavav, where the Chavetz Chaim gives a introduction to this discussion of a shofar with a hole in it. Says the Chavetz Chaim Chavav, Im Nikav, Aktim Lazar Sif Hakdama Kitzara. I'm going to give a short introduction to this sif, says the Chavetz Chaim, for who? And this Hakdama is as follows. Isa b'Gemara, the Gemara says in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, Tana Rabbana, we learned in a brisa. Nikev, if the shofar developed a hole, was stamai, and you went ahead and you sealed the hole. Well, then we have a machlokes. The Tanakama says, ben b'minoi, whether you sealed up the hole using the same the same type of material as the shofar, ubein shaloi b'minoi, or you used some other type of substance other than shofar, puzzle, the Tanakama says it doesn't matter. If the shofar developed a hole and you went ahead and you sealed up the hole, it doesn't matter what type of material you used. Whether you used shofar material or you used some other type of material, either way, that shofar is puzzle. That's the opinion of the Tanakama. Rabbi Nassan says, it depends. B'minoi, if you sealed up the hole with shofar material, kosher, then the shofar is kosher. Shaloi b'minoi, if you sealed it up using some other type of material, puzzle, then it's puzzle. So a simple reading in the brisa gives us a very simple machlokes. You have a shofar that has a hole, and you went ahead and you sealed it up. The Tanakama is machmir. The Tanakama says, I don't care what you sealed it up with. Whether you sealed it up with shofar material or some other type of material, it doesn't matter. The shofar is puzzle. Rabbi Nassan is more makel. Rabbi Nassan says, depends what you used to seal it up. If you used shofar material, then it's kosher. If you used non-shofar material, then it's puzzle. That's a simple reading of the brisa. Of course, it's going to get more complicated. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the paiskim say the kaimalon Rabbi Nassan. The paiskim say that we paskid like the more kula de kashita, we paskid like Rabbi Nassan, that if you sealed it up b'minoi, if you sealed up the hole using shofar material, then the shofar is kosher. Now come the complications. V'amrinon sham, and the Gemara says over there, Daha de miksha Rabbi Nassan b'minoi. When Rabbi Nassan says that if you sealed up the hole using shofar material, the shofar is kosher, hainu dafka kishenishtayir rubai shaloi nikev. The first caveat is, yes, if you sealed up the hole using shofar material, Rabbi Nassan says that the shofar is kosher. However, says the Gemara, that's only if the majority of the shofar is whole. It doesn't have any punctures. If the shofar is like perforated, if there are holes all over the shofar, so the majority of the shofar has holes in it, then it's not kosher. V'hinei b'Berurah sugya yesh de'os bein rishonim. Now we have a machlokes rishonim how to understand Rabbi Nassan. Harambam v'siyata, the Rambam and other rishonim who agree with him, mefarshim, they explain the Rabbi Nassan kai a'ein ma'akev ha'tekiah. Rabbi Nassan, when Rabbi Nassan says that the shofar is kosher if you seal it up with shofar material, so the Gemara said, first of all, one thing that you need is that roiv of the shofar has to be undamaged. The majority of the shofar has to have no holes in it. That's one thing that the Gemara said you need. Now the Rambam says there's another caveat, and that is that this is only true if the sealed up hole does not change the sound of the shofar. So the Rabbi Nassan kai ha'ein ma'akev ha'tekiah. Rabbi Nassan is talking about a case where the voice, the sound of the shofar is unchanged. Dahainu, that is, achar stima, after you go ahead and seal up the hole, chazar koiloi likamoi shehaya tchila, the sound of the shofar goes back to the way it originally was, kaidem shenikev, before it got a hole, before it became punctured. So again, Rabbi Nosson says the shofar developed a hole and you sealed it up. It depends what you used to seal it up. If you seal it up with shofar material, it's kosher. If you seal it up with non-shofar material, it's puzzle. Okay, but if you sealed it up with shofar material, it's kosher. Says the Gemara, when is that true that if you seal it up with shofar material, it's kosher? Only if the majority of the shofar is undamaged. Comes along the Rambam and the other Rishonim that agree with him, and the Rambam says there's another caveat, and that is, when is it kosher if you seal up the hole with shofar material? If, after you seal up the hole, the shofar sounds the way it did before it ever became punctured. Va'afilu hachi, and even in that case, ein kosher ela b'minoi. Still, the hole has to be sealed up with shofar material. So if you sealed up the hole with non-shofar material, and now it sounds exactly like it originally did before it became punctured, it's puzzle, because you sealed it up with non-shofar material. But if you seal it up with shofar material, it's okay. Nimtza, it comes out that according to the Rambam, be'inan tlasa l'maliyusa, you need 3 ingredients. There are 3 factors that are required for the punctured shofar to be kosher. What are the 3 factors? Einoi ma'akev hatakia. It has to be that after you sealed up the hole, the shofar sounds like it originally did before it ever got a puncture. But if it sounds different, then it's puzzle. Uveminoi. And you also need that you used shofar material to seal up the hole. But if you used some other kind of material, you used glue to seal up the hole, then it's going to be puzzle. And then the third ingredient is the factor that the Gemara told us about. V'nishtaya rubai. And there has to be that roiv, the majority of the shofar, is undamaged. Aval b'chasar echad me'elu. But if you're missing any one of these factors, puzzle, then the shofar is going to be puzzle. So if you sealed it up with non-shofar material, it's puzzle, even if it sounds exactly the way it did originally, and even if roiv of the shofar is undamaged. If it doesn't sound the same, if it has a new sound, then it's puzzle, even if you sealed it up with shofar material, and even if the majority of it is undamaged. And if the majority of the shofar is damaged, has holes in it, then it's puzzle, even if it sounds the way it originally did, and even if you sealed up the holes using shofar material. That's the Rambam. Zui adea harishayna shehuvakan, and the Rambam is going to form the basis for the first opinion that the Mechaber is going to give us here in Siv Zayin. Okay. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. V'harosh v'siyatoi. However, the Rosh and those who agree with him, Svir Lahu, they hold the Rabbi Nosson Koi Rak Ma'akev Atkiya, that Rabbi Nosson is not addressing a case where the sound of the shofar is unchanged. No, Rabbi Nosson is actually addressing a case where the sound of the shofar is changed. And the chiddush of Rabbi Nosson is va'afilu hachi. Even though the shofar now sounds different than it originally did, kosher b'minoi, the shofar is still kosher if you seal up the puncture using shofar material. Ubishe'enoi ma'akev, but if the sound of the shofar is not different, if the sound of the shofar is taka back to the way it was originally before it ever became punctured, afilu shaloi b'minoi kosher im nishtayar rubai. Then, according to the Rosh, even if you sealed up the hole using non-shofar material, as long as most of the shofar is undamaged, it's kosher. And now, according to this Rosh, so now this is a more kulidika opinion. Because according to the Rosh, you don't need 3 ingredients for the punctured shofar to be kosher. You only need 2 factors, not 3 factors. What are the 2 factors? Dahainu minoi. You need that the hole was sealed up with shofar material, verubai, and it has to be that roiv is undamaged, and even if the sound is different, the shofar is kosher. Or you can have a different 2 factors. Rubai, or you have the majority is undamaged, and the sound is back to the way it was originally, And even if you sealed up the hole with non-shofar material, it's kosher. And this is what we're going to see later on in the Mechaber, when the Mechaber says, we're going to see a more lenient opinion expressed by the Mechaber, which is based on the Rosh, which the Mechaber says you could rely on in a Shasat Chak. Okay. So with this Hakdama, let's go back into the Mechaber. So the Mechaber says in Siv Zayin, Im Nikev, if the shofar became punctured. Im lois tamai, okay, the shofar became punctured, and you didn't seal the hole at all. You left the hole. There's a hole. Says the Mechaber, Im lois tamai, if you don't seal the hole, af al pi shenishtana koiloi, even though the shofar now sounds different because it has a hole. Remember, the shofar is a wind instrument. If you have a hole in the wall of the shofar where air can escape, that's going to change the sound of the shofar. You don't have the same volume of air passing through the shofar. So it's going to change the sound. So there says the Mechaber, Im nikev, if the shofar became punctured, Im lois tamai, if you don't fill up the hole, so then afal pishen ishtana koiloi, even though the sound is going to be different, kosher, the shofar is kosher. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chav Zayin, afal pishen ishtana koiloi, even though the sound of the shofar is going to be different, kosher, the shofar is still kosher. Why? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, shekol hakoilos ksherim b'shofar, because we already learned the halacha previously that when it comes to a shofar, any sound of the shofar, it doesn't matter if it has a deep sound or a thin sound or a loud sound or a quieter sound, it doesn't matter. Whatever the sound of the shofar is, it's kosher. So okay, this shofar has a hole. So before it had a hole, it had one coil. Now that it has a hole, it is a different coil. So what? Every coil is kosher. So this is a kosher shofar. And according to the Mechaber, this is even l'chatchila. You have a shofar with a puncture, and the puncture changed the sound of the shofar. So what? So now it sounds different. Who cares? It has a hole. Who cares? Doesn't matter if it has a hole. The kasva paiskim, and not only that, the paiskim say, even if you do not have the minimum size of a shofar, tahainu tefach, which is a tefach, sholem, intact, belin kavim without any holes, nami kosher. So according to the Mechaber, the Mefarsh, the Paiskim say that according to the Mechaber, even if this shofar has holes all over it, and you don't have a part of the shofar that's one tefach without holes, so you don't have the minimum share of a shofar without holes, it doesn't matter. It's a kosher shofar anyway. Basically, according to the Mechaber, the hole doesn't make a difference. So it has holes. Who cares? Nevertheless, kasva achrayim, the achrayim right, if the majority of the shofar has holes in it, so it's like a perforated shofar, then even if you have a tefach without any holes, gamkein puzzle, then the shofar is puzzle, the rubai kikulai. If roiv of the shofar is perforated, then it's a perforated shofar, it's full of holes, that's already not kosher. V'ayim b'bir Allah. Okay. So far we have the Mechaber over here, who says you have holes in the shofar, and you didn't seal them, you didn't fill them in, fine, no problem. Even if it changes the sound of the shofar, it's okay. Now let's go to the Ramah. The Ramah says, Miu, however, Im yesh shofar acher, the Ramah says, if you have another shofar that doesn't have holes, ein l'skaya bazeh, you should not use this shofar that has a hole. Why? Ki yesh omrim, because there are those that say, she'ein l'skaya b'shofar nakuv, because we have a kolbai, Chuvas Rush brought down over here, that hold that you shouldn't use a shofar with a hole. So very nice, the Mechaber says that even if it has a hole, it's okay. But we have Rishonim that say that you shouldn't use a shofar with a hole. So if you have another shofar, use a different shofar. Says the Mishnah Berurah Oiskat L'Chavches. Miu, nevertheless, the Ramah says, better you shouldn't use this shofar with the hole. Ki yesh omrim, svir lahu, these shitas hold, the shofar nakuv puzzle, that a shofar with a hole is puzzle, kemoi shofar shenistak, similar to a cracked shofar. We're going to learn later that a cracked shofar is puzzle. V'yesh lan halachos l'dei azu l'chatchila. And l'chatchila, we should be concerned with that opinion. V'afilu nishtaya by shir t'kia l'mala l'tzad ha'peh she'ein by neck of klal. And the Chavetz Chaim says this is true even if you have from the tip where the shofar goes to the mouth, even if you have from there going up, you have a tefach without any holes, so you would think, I have a sheer shofar over here, and the holes only start after the tefach, maybe you would think that's kosher. The Chavetz Chaim says no, l'chatchila you shouldn't use it. It seems, the Chavetz Chaim says, that even according to this opinion, that a shofar with holes in it is not kosher, that's only if the holes change the sound. But if the sound of the shofar is clear, then that hole doesn't matter, and you could blow in it. So you have a shofar with an unsealed hole, and it doesn't affect the sound of the shofar at all, you could use it. Okay, so until now, we were discussing a shofar that became punctured, and you did not do anything to seal up the puncture. That the Mechaber holds, no problem at all. The Ramah says better l'chatchila, you shouldn't use it. Now, what happens if you go to seal up the hole? Does that make it better or worse? We're going to see that that actually makes the situation worse. Continues the Mechaber on the bottom line. V'im stamai. Let's say you sealed up the hole, shaloi b'minoi, using non-shofar material. You decided to seal up the hole with glue. So now what's the halacha? Says the Mechaber, af al pi she'enoi ma'akev esatkiya la'achar stima, even if the voice of the shofar goes back exactly to the way it was before it got a hole. Shechazar koilai l'kemoi shehaya b'tchila. The sound of the shofar went back to exactly the way it was before it was ever punctured. So you have a shofar that had a beautiful coil, it got a puncture. The puncture changed the coil. According to the Mechaber, if you would stop right here and leave this shofar alone, according to the Mechaber, this shofar is perfectly kosher, even l'chatchila. According to the Ramah, l'chatchila, you shouldn't use it. You decided, I like the sound better before it had the hole. So you took crazy glue, Duco cement, and you went ahead and you stuffed up the hole, so you stuffed it up with something she'enoi b'minoi. Says the Mechaber, even if the sound of the shofar now goes back to the way it was originally before it ever had a hole, puzzle, this shofar is puzzle, afilu nishtayr by rubai, even if most of the shofar has no holes in it, this shofar is puzzle. Says the Mishnah Berurah, back on Nun Tes Amud Aleph, near the bottom, Oiskat Chav Tes. V'im stamai, if you sealed up the hole using something that's einoi minoi, using non-shofar material, Ritzonah Loimar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, even though according to the Mechaber, if you don't fill up the hole at all, the shofar is kosher. If you go to fill it up, garatfei, now you made matters worse by filling it up. Why does filling up the hole make matters worse? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. Because when you seal up the hole using non-shofar material, in Cain, then when you hear the sound of the shofar, it's not really just the sound of the shofar. Rak, kol shofar v'kol davar achar shemu'urav b'y. You had the shofar had one sound. After it became punctured, it had a different sound. Now you sealed up the hole using a davar she'enoi minoi, using non-shofar material, and now the sound went back to the way it was before. What does that tell you? That tells you that what you're listening to now is not l'shmaya kol shofar. You're not hearing the voice of the shofar. You're hearing the voice of the shofar and crazy glue. There's no mitzvah of hearing crazy glue. You're supposed to hear the sound of the shofar, but this is a shofar with crazy glue. You can't be yotze the mitzvah with that. The same halacha is true if you seal up the hole using shofar material, but But the sound of the shofar does not go back to the way it originally was before it ever had a hole. Obviously, the sound of this shofar is different than it originally was. So then it's not the sound of the shofar. It's the sound of the shofar together with the seal. The hastima ain't a betela. So that's why if you go to seal the hole, you actually could be making things worse. Because by sealing the hole, now you're not hearing the sound of the shofar. You're hearing the sound of the shofar with something else. Now, so far we're talking about where you went ahead and you sealed it up with shaloi b'minoi, with non-shofar material. That's why it's a problem so far here. Ice cotton limud. The Mechaber said, what does it mean that the seal is not ma'akiv the koil? So the Mechaber translated that as meaning shechazar koiloi l'kemoi shahaya b'tchila. That means that the sound of the shofar goes back to the way it was in the beginning, even before it ever got a puncture. Says the Mishnah Berurah cotton limud l'kemoi shahaya b'tchila, the way it was before it ever got a puncture. Kaidim shenikev, before it ever was punctured. Certainly, the Chaber is telling you like this: the shofar is puzzle even if the sound went back to the way it originally was before it ever got a puncture. Still, it's puzzle because you're hearing now the sound of the shofar and the seal, not the sound of the shofar. Says the Chavetz Chaim here in Ice Cotton Lamed, it's certainly puzzle if when you seal it, the sound goes back to the way it was when it already was punctured before you sealed it. Because now it's zicha not the koil of the shofar. The original koil, it doesn't have the sound of the original shofar. Okay, even though the shir was very short tonight, we're going to stop over here because this is really where we have to break. So we're going to break on the top line right before the word v'im. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shalom should say Yeshua Sefus and Parnasa to all those in need. And we should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu Amen. Be well.